Thank you. It's so nice to see so many of you here today, this February evening. We've got a really nice mix of old members from all the generations, including some current students. So thank you very much for coming down. We're really delighted to run these events with the support of college. So thanks to Christine and all the team that were here for everything that you do to support us. We tend to get together ahead of International Women's Day every year. So before we see everything coming out on LinkedIn, we're getting in there first in February before next week. This year we're doing an event in London. Obviously there's a critical mass of us here, but we will alternate with Oxford next year. So gearing towards the more current students, but also a burst of nostalgia for those of you who are able to go back as well. So the theme that we're talking about today is change and what it means to all of us, both professionally and personally. We've got a fantastic group of panellists, some of whom I've known for 25 years, others only a few months. So it's really nice to have you here and from across the year groups as well. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start off. So obviously the fire exit, obviously there, bathroom and cloakroom through here. And we'll open up for refreshments again at the end, but let us know if you need anything as well. We'll hear from the panel and hopefully open it out for some great Q&A and then plenty of time for networking in a safe space amongst this group of Queen's women. So just a little bit of background on QWN. We kind of got together around 2017, started by Alison and Wendy and a number of women from 1979, who were the first group of undergraduates. But also with women from across the generations too, trying to celebrate the co-education of women at Queen's since 1979, but also building a legacy and what it means to have that connection to Queen's and supporting one another through the journeys that we're on. We've also had the support of Dr. Claire Craig as a provost, who by coincidence was the first female provost from the time that we got together and celebrated that co-education. And she's been a brilliant support. So we look forward to celebrating the end of her tenure this summer as she steps down. So just setting the scene for the event, we'll introduce each of the panellists. I've got a few questions to get the juices flowing, but I'm sure we'll have some questions from the audience as well. And take it from there. So you may have seen some of the teasers on LinkedIn and on our website. But I'd like to invite the panel to introduce themselves briefly. So let's start with the near end with Rhea, our representative from 1979.
Gosh, from the Stone Ages, I have to say. Thank you very much indeed. All right, so yes, physiological sciences in 1979, medicine, the rest of us. Very quickly, after leaving Queen's, did my clinical course and then qualified as a doctor. Very quickly realised that actually that really wasn't what I wanted to do. And very quickly moved into management in the NHS. Just by myself, there was no career path or anything like around that. And that was interesting. That was, you know, we can talk about it when we have the change discussion a bit later. And then after moving up the ranks within the NHS, lots of changes happening, I then found myself without a job, so I decided to set up my own healthcare consulting business. None of the big stuff, just little old me, which I did in about 30 odd years, finally finishing off as a non-executive director locally at Barts Health, NHS Trust, Frimley Health Foundation Trust where I live, and also Solent NHS Trust. Now I'm basically retired.
But she's here tonight. Oh, yes. And Rhea's kind of with the organisation for this event, so thank you. And Charlotte, over to you.
Hi, so yes, I was a linguist, Spanish and Portuguese, 1991, which is further away than I care to admit. Yeah, in brief. So my career path began a bit randomly, basically taking any job that needed a Portuguese speaker. So that meant I translated a dictionary, I bought music for Virgin in Lisbon, and then I ended up trying to set up a Latin American ferry route for hover speed, which fell apart. So then I bought some cigarettes and alcohol for a bit until I finally settled on a job at BBC Monitoring, which is As someone said to me when I applied, the sorts of place people like you work. So full of linguists and monitoring the world's media, set up in the war to monitor propaganda. So sort of coming back to its fore now in the era of disinformation. So I was a journalist for about 12 years, and then I gradually started getting sucked into the world of projects and transformation, digital transformation, operating model transformation, organizational transformation, culture transformation. Pretty much done it all. Left the BBC after longer than I'm going to admit a couple of years ago, and tried my hand as a freelance consultant. Had a lot of fun getting back to my languages and traveling around Europe, coaching and consulting, but ultimately decided that I needed to be back at base for various reasons. So I'm just right in the middle of a change curve, 6 weeks into a brand new job, funnily enough, and I almost dread to admit it with you sitting next to me, leading culture transformation at the rather beleaguered nursing and midwifery regulator. So I've just come from a big change workshop that's gone on all day today, and that's me.
Our change professional, everyone. Over to Anne.
Yeah, so I'm Anna. I was PPE apparently in 1999, which feels like far too long ago. And I think I chose PPE because I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do with my life, and that sort of carried on as a little bit of a theme for several years. I started kind of qualifying as a marketing and PR on an accidental graduate scheme, which is definitely a story for another day. Ended up working for the British Equestrian team because I kind of like ponies and I was qualified in PR by that point. So I spent 4 years travelling with the British team, supporting them as their press officer at international events, which found me in Beijing in 2008. For the Paralympic Games, where I discovered that apparently working on the Olympics and the Paralympics was a job that you could do. And ran into someone I'd worked with on the train 6 months later and landed myself a job on London 2012. So I worked on London 2012 for 3 years, delivering media operations, so looking after all of the positions for broadcast photographers, press operations around that, and then have since sort of travelled the world in kind of the loosely sense, delivering major events around the world, and have been back in the UK for the longest I've ever been here, for about the last 4 years, because I now work for UK Sport, who are an arm's length body of the government. So my PPE degree has come full circle eventually, helping me out. And I work with the government now on our major sort of event strategy in the UK. So which are the big events we're going to bring to the UK and what that means for sort of social change, economic change, and what events can basically do for the country. So lots of personal change and career change. I finally landed in something that I've been doing for longer than 4 years, which is the first.
Anna was an NSREP. So
I was also an NSREP.
Yeah, let's start there. Over to you, Chloe.
Thanks, everyone. So I read biochemistry. I was pretty sure that I wanted to be a research scientist, and then I realised that I really didn't enjoy research during my masters, which is a bit of a problem. So I thought I'd go and find out what business was about, knowing nothing about it and not really knowing anybody who worked in that area. I did a grad scheme in a large consultancy, thought I would then figure out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life and get a real job. And here I am, many don't even want to think about how many years later, still in consultancy. But I now run my own firm. So I founded a company called In Tandem in 2018. And we do growth strategy, innovation, and new ventures. We work with large companies like Philips, Ford, BA Systems across sector to help them identify, shape, and launch new businesses. Those will often involve emerging technologies, industry disruption, big shifts and change. So yeah, really looking forward to the panel discussion today.
Thanks, Chloe. Over to you, Helena.
Thanks, it's lovely to be here. So I'm Helena Lee. I read classics from education in 2000. When I left, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I ended up in a grad scheme in an ad agency called Ogilvy Mather, because I thought it seemed like a really good mix of business and creativity, and it was really fun. And stayed in advertising for 6 years. So I worked at Ogilvy, Low, Stella Artois, and then Saatchi & Saatchi, but then changed and decided to retrain and went into journalism. And so now I'm a writer. I'm the features director and special projects director at Harper's Bazaar magazine. So I'm responsible for all the art and culture strategy and all of the content within the brand. So whether that's delivering it through the magazine, all of our events, working with clients to deliver another project. I edit our Bazaar Art magazine, which is an annual that comes out every year during Freeze, and our Power magazine as well. But it's great because I get to work with incredible artists and writers like Margaret Atwood or Tracy Emin, and we've sort of worked together on delivering really incredible content.
And last but not least, Rhiannon from our elite group of female mathematicians. Over to you.
So yeah, I read mathematics matriculated in 2000 with our lovely host, Ethelburga, with the best ones. So I guess it's really interesting actually hearing from everybody else in terms of how much things have changed, like how many jobs you've had, and that you didn't know what you wanted to do when you left. I'm probably the exact opposite. After studying maths, started at a small consultancy on their actuarial scheme in 2003, and yeah, I guess by the end of the second year I decided I was probably going to be an actuary, took that job and effectively stayed there for 20 years. The company's changed a lot around me, so whilst I technically didn't apply for any jobs in 20 years, we went from a small independent consultancy of about 50 people when I joined. I was the first kind of formal grad scheme, and by the time I left, following a number of mergers and buyouts and things, there were about 45,000 globally. So a lot of change in terms of technically one job over the years. After doing 20 years of consultancy, about 18 months ago, I took the plunge and moved to an insurer. So still very much the same industry, very much kind of same job description as a reserve actuary, but very, very different stakeholders and the way of working, kind of working in-house as opposed to consultancy. So that was a huge move. So yeah, I cover some of that and the change conversations later. And I guess at the same time, quite a lot of change personal life-wise. Went from being a young, carefree 21-year-old living in London with somebody in this room to, moving zone 6, 2 kids, working partly from home, partly in the city. So a lot of kind of personal change over that, and then coming back and picking my career up a bit more once the kids are now kind of a bit more settled in school and things. So yeah, slightly, I think quite a different take on what change it is.
Thank you, Rhiannon. So I've got a few questions. I won't ask the same questions to all of you, and I'm sure it'll become a bit more free-flowing. But I think everyone's coming at this from a different perspective, and really grateful for you sharing your stories. I will start back up at the similar thread just to get the ball rolling, though. Through your experience, Ray, what does change mean to you? What embodies it to you?
It's exciting, but incredibly scary, because I started expecting to embark on a medical career, carry on right through to being a consultant, do research, conferences, etc., etc., etc. And when I realised that wasn't what I wanted to do, it was really quite an awful thing to realise. And it happened very early on, as I mentioned, in my junior doctor career. And I thought, what do I do? And that was the beginning of looking for what I wanted to do next, and going through that particular journey. On the positive side, you never know what change will produce. You never know what will be around the corner, and that's the bit that has kept me going. I could say more, but I think that's it.
Do you want to chip in?
Yeah, so I guess for me, change in the media and the BBC and now in the news sector has been really about how rapidly the external environment is changing, often as a result of technology, or geopolitical instability or any other number of reasons, but sort of just the ramping up the pace, the speed of change, which means that, maybe 20 years ago, when you were involved in a change project, you had a vision and you set out to achieve the change and you thought it might end at the end of the project. Whereas I think change now in the workplace is just the way of life. And if your organisation can't adapt to change, then you've got a real problem.
Mm-hmm. And Anna, tell us a bit about changing locations and projects, because you've done that quite a bit.
Quite a few times, yeah. So on average, I think I've lived in different places for about 2.5 years. So sort of from London to Glasgow, on to Toronto, to the Gold Coast, to America, then back to London with some other bits and pieces in between. And I think the wonderful thing when you work in an industry where, expat's a bit of an outdated term, but you are working in an industry where you're with other people who are also quite nomadic and transient. So you develop a bit of work family around that, and you come across the same people in different places. So you might be in a different country, but you're with some of the same people that you were. Some you bring new local people in, you bring young people in, and that's sort of really interesting. But I think that like just continually packing your bags and moving is incredibly exciting, and you get to work in lots of different cultures. You get to understand how different people work. But there's also this thing that happens at the end where your visa ends, your job ends, your lease on your house runs out. My husband also works in events. I met him working on London 2012. So we've generally both become unemployed at the same time, which is a really challenging thing to deal with. But you just learn to plan for it. You learn to plan that that's going to happen. But then you leave all of your friends, your family, the life that you knew, all the things that you did on a Wednesday, and then you go and do something else, which it's great, and I can highly recommend it. But then you sort of get to this point where you're like, actually, kind of need to get off the train and would like to do the same thing for a while. But I think one of the other things it teaches you is just different ways of doing things, which is, so when I first went to Australia, I couldn't get anything done for about 6 months because a British person that came from Canada in Australia, people are just like, sorry, get to the point. And when I came back to London, people were like, wow, you're quite blunt. And I was like, oh yeah, we need to tone that back down. So it's just this, you learn different ways of dealing with different people and getting things done. And that's really interesting as well.
And then with Chloe, you talked about your kind of decision to leave the science world behind, going to consultancy. Tell us a little bit about the decision to create your own firm, what went into that.
Yeah. So that journey's been surprising. I never would have predicted that at all. I think for me, change is about opportunity and growth, and I've actually been quite opportunistic through my career. I've never had a 10-year plan. I still don't have a 10-year plan, or even probably a 3-year plan. But I have seen opportunities and broadly taking them. I think because the upside almost always outweighs the downside or the risk. So for me, I started my career in a big firm for 100,000 people. It was very structured. It was very organized. There was a really clearly set career path there. But I had the chance to move to a boutique firm of 35 people where I felt I could have a bigger impact. And that firm specialized in innovation, which was the area I was excited about. I was there for 8 years, grew that firm to the point that it was acquired. And at that point, I didn't want to stay through the acquisition and the integration of pain, to be honest, that would come with that. I didn't really believe that acquisitions and consulting really worked. So there was just this wonderful moment of opportunity where me and my co-founder both didn't believe in that path and had the opportunity to go and do our own thing. And we had this wonderful period where, because of non-competes and a very difficult ex-boss, we had 6 months of enforced time off to just think about the firm we were building. And that was so wonderful because you never really get that time in your career, but actually to go back through everything you've done and think about what worked and really why and what didn't, and how could we build a better company, one that has better career paths for people, better culture, what's the vision for the business that we want to build. So that was hugely exciting for me. But it was about being opportunistic and taking what was in front and trying to shape it. I think a lot of change is about being comfortable with ambiguity and finding your own path through that. I think a lot of people find that quite hard, and rightly so. And a lot of what I do with my clients is help them step out of their comfort zone and invest in new areas and keep up with the pace of change of technology and geopolitics and everything else that we've been talking about. So for me, it's hugely exciting, but also scary.
The word scary is going to come up a few times, I think. Helen, you talked about changing paths as well. What was the the moment that kind of took you into your current line of work? What was the inspiration?
Yeah, I mean, I think I looked at the bosses ahead of me and I just thought that's not where I want to be. I don't really want to be doing that. And you know, I was traveling a lot and presenting from my bed at about 11 at night to Latin America. And I just thought this isn't actually what I want to be stressed about. It's not, I do care about it, but not enough to justify doing this continually. And even though it was fun and I met some of the best people in my life, I knew it just wasn't quite what I wanted to do. And I kept sort of over probably 18 months trying to work out what it was. And then I think when I think I had written something, and it's not as though I wrote continually through university. Wow. That's fantastic. Right, okay. Something felt right when I heard about someone who had actually transitioned from advertising and did an MA in magazine journalism at City University. And something inside just seemed to click. You know, I really want to explore that. But I never believed that I could write. Now, I'd always written when I was little. But I think because both my parents were immigrants, they come from Malaysia and Hong Kong, it was just not on the cards at all. It was never something that I could ever explore, sort of trying to be anything in the arts, a writer, an artist, anything like that was just off the table. And you know, I always had to make sure that I had, you know, a salary. And I did think it was a profession, really. So when I found out about this MA, I just thought, right, at the age of 28, 29, it was just a way of completely formalising what I could do, back out the other end, fully formed journalist. And it would teach me everything. It would teach me feature writing, digital journalism, data journalism, broadcast, everything. And it was that was a real change. I was with people who were just coming out of university. But I approached it very professionally because I'd been a director in advertising and then I kind of went right to the bottom essentially. And it was great. And, you know, a lot of the people I sort of was with at that MA, I'm still very, very good friends today. They're fantastic and really successful. And I'd never done work experience before because I'd gone in straight at the graduate level. And there I was in sort of my holidays, rearranging editors' bookshelves into alphabetical order. Just think, you know, you just got to watch and learn and just see what's going on. They don't know that I've got, you know, the experience I do. You know, I just want to see how it all works. And then when I finished, I had this incredible tutor who did creative non-fiction with us. And at the end of it, she took us all aside and said, like, what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, you know, maybe I want to work, do some freedom. And she's like, you can do anything. And that, I think that was the moment where I was like, right, I can be really ambitious with this. And then went for 2 jobs, one at CCA and one at Harvard Bazaar, got both. And then I sort of have been at Harvard Bazaar after 13 years.
Great. And Rhiannon, when we were messaging about this event and I asked you what change meant to you, you wrote something that I thought was really beautiful about making things easier for the people that come after you. So tell me a little bit about what change means to you, but if you could elaborate on that, I think that would be really lovely for everyone to hear.
Yeah, I think one of the things there's been a lot of change in views, I think, in the financial services industry since I started. I mean, starting in 2003, it wasn't as bad as it was starting in the 80s or 90s. But you would still get a little bit of people would assume I was going to, you know, pour the coffee because I was the female in the room, and that sort of element, and you know, a little bit of if there was we did a conference around here in the runoff industry, which is even like older and more male and more white than kind of insurance in general, and it was very much kind of like, oh, put the young female graduate there so the people kind of understand. And it was that sort of, I've been quite lucky that I haven't had anything really bad in terms of kind of sexual harassment or kind of that undertone of kind of women not being kind of able to do this, or that idea that, you know, oh, well, at some point, you know, oh God, she's hitting 30, she's clearly going to disappear off and, you know, have babies and be useless, right? That kind of undertone was very much there.
And I think I've had a number of line managers over the years, both male and female, that have been sometimes not what you expect in terms of how supportive they are for women. I've had female bosses that were very much kind of like, well, I did it the hard way, I'm not making life easy for you. I've had a female boss whose husband was at home with kids, so she didn't really get the working mother thing the way that I was doing it. I've had some male line managers that have been amazing. And I've had a real mix. And I think seeing that in terms of how much difference it can make to a woman's confidence to be told you can do anything is incredible. So for me, that concept of change is continuous improvement of having the women that are coming after you feel more supported than you were, I think is change for me, I think.
Brilliant, thank you. Start thinking of your questions. I'm going to ask one more to the panel, and then we'll open it up. I guess really keen to get your advice. If there was one thing that you would say about how you dealt with change, what you've learned, turning your fear into opportunity, very keen to hear from you. And we can go in any order now, so whenever you're ready, let me know what you'd like to share.
I'm happy.
I think for me, I am one of those people who's always find change quite terrifying, right? It doesn't come naturally to me, especially when it's enforced. And I think when we had the first buyout and we were going from this little independent consultancy to being owned by this kind of big corporate, was really scary. So we done thought the culture was going to kind of change entirely. And I was feeling quite kind of scared and negative about that. But actually, in hindsight, it was at a very good time. It was around when I kind of just got married. We were thinking of having kids, and all of a sudden, because we were this big kind of global corporate, there were things like paid maternity leave that like wouldn't have been quite as much an option in the. I mean, we would have, but it was just much more supportive of things. So actually, as it turned out, it was really a positive change. I was very lucky that I had my 20s in this kind of work hard, play hard, and the amount I learned was incredible. I couldn't have kept doing that and being a kind of, homemaker and things at the same time. And actually, as much as I thought it was going to be terrible, it was probably one of the best things that happened because it meant I did keep my career going. Whereas I think had I tried to do that at a smaller consultancy, it would have gone one way or the other. I either wouldn't have spent much time at home or I would have just been anymore. I can't do this, it's too hard. So I think taking what can be terrifying and going, actually, this could be amazing. And some of it is only in hindsight you see it, but not to be as scared as you might be when things are pushed upon you.
Yeah, and celebrate that, Dan.
And celebrate. Yes.
Charlotte.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of what you've just said, actually, and I think, my reflection would be always learn from the people around you. I'm sort of I'm 13 years into being a change professional, as Elizabeth very kindly put it. But, I've just come from a workshop today led by a consultancy, and I've learned some new skills today, some new techniques for running, facilitating events that I haven't tried before. Just always keep an open mind if you're involved in change in any way, shape or form, whether it's being sort of done to you against your will, or whether you're leading it, or whether you're somewhere in the middle. I think, the really important thing is to not make assumptions and to try and keep, a growth mindset and to look for the opportunities within it. Because all change is scary and it does all begin with a loss. So even if you hate the status quo, there's something scary about giving it up because better the devil you know. So, I mean, even in those sorts of scenarios, it's challenging, and that's just human nature. So, yeah, I think my reflection would be just remember you can always learn. There's always more to discover. And if you keep that sort of frame of mind, then you'll find some positives, even when the going is tough. And I have to say, 6 weeks into a very very high profile, high scrutiny, challenging, purposeful role. I'm really feeling that. But you've got to look for the positives, and you need to have some boundaries change, because it's very easy to burn out. And women, I think in particular, we keep giving and we keep giving, and that's at some point you have to say, actually, I've got no boundaries here. And change is a very easy place to burn out. So, keep a growth mindset, but look after your well-being.
Andrea, you've spoken about facing the fear.
Well, yes. The other side of that is actually have the courage of your convictions. I really want to do this. I know I can do this. I've seen other people do the stuff really badly. And this is the thing I was actually doing. And that's what really got me away from medicine into management, because I just thought, no matter how hard I try, running around like a headless chicken in this ward, doing the bloods and doing whatever, the processes outside of it just conspired to make it difficult. So I thought, right, I'm going to do it. And that's what actually drove me. And yes, it's easy, but I felt I could make a difference with regard to that. And the thing about that is that there's no right path. There's no sort of correct routes to go down. This is for you to work out, because that's the whole point of change, because it's not been done before. And that is what has actually kept me going through my various sort of changes throughout my life. I've just thought, I can do this. I can do it a bit better. It's scary, but I have to say that to myself. We're very good at our imposter syndromes, aren't we, folks? And even when I'm retired, I still feel a bit impostery. So, just keep going. So, go for it, is what I say.
I'm inspired. Yeah. And you.
Yeah, I think probably in terms of like sort of a piece of advice, trust your instinct, because it's normally right. And actually, if something doesn't feel right, then it probably isn't. And that actually, yes, taking a deep breath and saying yes when something does feel right is amazingly empowering, exciting, and actually trusting your instinct that you can do it. There's a female rugby player, I don't know, always come across Alona Mayer, who said, someone interviewed her the other day and said, do you have imposter syndrome? She said, no, I don't even know what that is. And she's a great female role model. We can come back to her. But also to trust your instinct when you want to say no. And actually, it's okay sometimes to make the decision not to do something that's a change. I mean, we've had this great, exciting transient lifestyle, and it's been a recent opportunity to potentially go to LA and do another sort of Olympic gig, and we decided not to go this time. And it's the first time we've actually said, no, we don't want to do that this time. And actually, that's also the right decision. And to change and to grow, you don't always need to be making big, massive life changes. And actually, for us, some of the smaller things that we're doing in our lives now, some of the smaller changes we're making, and the more personal things that have happened over the last few years are enough change for us right now. And that's good, and that's still great. And actually, I think it's just trust your instincts, trust your confidence, and say yes or no, depending on. But you don't always have to say yes to everything. That's not the rules.
Lots of choices. Chloe, I'll come to you.
I think, for everything I've heard around growth mindset and opportunity, I've sort of talked to that. I guess the flip side is, what about not changing? What do you lose if you don't change? You miss out on opportunities and new experiences and learning and things that, at face value, you may think doesn't sound like a good opportunity and becomes a fantastic career opportunity. You take something away from all of these experiences. So I think just, yes, understanding and finding the opportunity, but also understanding the downside. We talk about risk a lot, but actually there's huge risk of just standing still and doing nothing. The world will probably change around you, and you become left behind. And as a company founder, people say, entrepreneurs, you take lots of risks, but you don't. You manage risk and you reduce risk and you find ways of minimizing it. I mentioned not working I had no income for 9 months when I set the company up. Now, in that situation, you don't take big risks. You minimize it and try and make it as successful as possible. So I think just reframing a bit the downside when we think about change, and focusing more, as others have been talking about, on the opportunity and the upside.
And Helen, give us the editorial.
Well, I think when it comes to things like big change, that's the fun of it. I think if you break it down into little changes, it's a lot more manageable. So I set up a platform for British and Southeast Asians in the UK because they have not an amazing amount of representation. So that started because I was in a cinema and I was watching a film, and that was the most terrible stereotyped representation of it was Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and it was Bruce Lee, who was a real hero, not just to Asians, but a lot of people in the world. And he was the only minority represented in a film about the Hollywood greats, and he was really sort of very much mocked, even though there was absolutely no need to, and it was because he was fighting against Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt doesn't need any validation at all. So there was no need for him to be mocked, and so. I remember just thinking, what can I do about this? Because there's no reviews that are really taking up and saying this is racist. I don't know, I don't have the vocabulary to talk about it. Who will actually support me in sort of talking about it? And I think I found 2 articles that maybe said it's a bit sort of distasteful with the New Yorker or with Esquire, but only in the US. And so there was just a massive gap in education in the UK about racism against people of East Asian origin, representations that on screen you could probably name less than 5 people who actors of East Asian origin. So and truthfully, I think when people sort of see our faces, they don't necessarily think British, and I think that's a real problem. So I set up a salon, a cultural salon. So it's like monthly that people come to, change makers. People could change the news agenda, people could understand their stories. From that, COVID came. So it's like, okay, you need to change tack. So put together a book, 17 essays from Foster Prize-winning writers, actors like Gemma Chan, NHS nurses like Filipinos who are completely overlooked. Even if you talk about the nurses, do we talk about the Filipinos who represent such a big community and as one of the highest sort of proportion to die in the NHS? And it's sort of, I think I'm still trying to change things, and it's such a long journey, but it's sort of, if I think about the big change, it's depressing. But if I think about the small changes, the little things, the people I can galvanise and bring along with me in the journey, then it's so much more enriching and nourishing to do that.